Hello, Dodger fans. It is Game One of NLCS Day today, and we are joined today on the Dodger Beat preview show with a new correspondent, Juan Ramirez, who is a filmmaker that is also in Los Angeles. Welcome. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm ready for some Dodger baseball.
There it is. So you have a better radio voice than I do, so like it's perfect for this. Perfect. As we kind of go in and we do a deep dive into a little bit of everything, uh, a couple changes that the Dodgers have done to the roster. No Gavin Lux, no Terrence Gore, and obviously the addition of Edwin Rios and Alex Wood to that 28 player roster for Game One starting tonight. How do you feel about those additions, Juan?
I honestly, I don't think it's going to make or break them. The only thing, Terrence Gore was only on here just to steal bases and for have a runner on second just in case, late in the game we need the runners in scoring position. But other than that, Terrence Gore wasn't going to see any action. So what I am curious about is how healthy is Edwin Rios? Not that he's a speed demon, but let's say the way this ballpark is playing, he hits one in the gap. Is he going to be able to get to second base, or is he going to turn a double into a single? But other than those, I don't think. This team is set. This team is stacked, and they need. So these small little moves that they're making, I don't think are going to make or break the Dodgers in this series. But hopefully his bat comes through for us when he needs him, because I'm sure he's going to see some DH action in this series.
And I agree with you. He's obviously a left-handed bat. Hitting 250 with 8 home runs in 83 plate appearances this season. The funny thing is, though, as a pinch hitter this season, he's 0 for 4 with a walk and hit by a pitch. So I definitely suspect that if anything, he would be a DH kind of going through the series. And if anything, I think it wouldn't surprise me either if him and AJ Pollock trade off on the DH duties just because of their bat and their ability, like you said, to turn that single into a double. So it's going to be interesting. The Alex Wood component I find a little interesting because, as you know, we have our issues with the ninth inning currently. So I'm super curious to see where he kind of fits into the mix, because obviously, they're doing these little tinkerings of the roster, if you will, for the depth component, because there's a super high probability that they could play 7 games, 6 games in the same amount of days consecutively. With Wood, added to that roster, he had a 6.39 ERA with 15 strikeouts and 6 walks in 12 and 2/3 innings. So it's going to be interesting to see, kind of that caveat as far as him being there. But as far as the ninth inning goes, someone on Twitter asked us as we, kind of previewed the show, if Dustin May could possibly make an appearance to close out games. I'm going to be super, Twitterverse predictor guy. I think at this point, anyone is kind of available as long as they don't have a start the following day to throw that ninth inning, because right now if anything, that's the main weakness that the Dodgers have is in the ninth. If you were to have a prediction tonight, Juan, if let's say the Dodgers kind of go out and do what they've been doing as of late, hypothetically they drop 5 runs, Buehler gives us 6 innings. How do you think that bridge to the ninth goes, given the current state of affairs?
Look, if anything, I think what the Dodgers are predictable. I think Roberts and Friedman, they have a game plan on how they approach every game, and they stick to that game plan. And that's actually one of the biggest concerns for me in this series is, are the Dodgers going to just stick to their game plan as in previous years they always do? Look, I am not against sabermetrics. I think numbers are important. You need to make informed decisions. The thing that concerns me is when you go so numbers heavy, you go straight into the sabermetrics, you forget about the eye test. And I still think the eye test is a very important component of baseball. And if you see a guy is dealing, I don't understand. Let him stay in the game. I go back to that Cubs World Series in 2016 when Hendricks was dealing against the Indians, and then Madden took him out of the game. And I didn't understand that. I was scratching my head because the Indians couldn't do anything against against Hendricks. And it almost cost them the game, right? That game 7. So I just hope that the Dodgers don't have a similar situation where someone's dealing on the mound and then they decide to take him out because that's what the game plan says. Okay, the game plan says for the 7th inning, we're going to go with Baez. And in the 8th inning, we're going to go with Blake Trinan. And then, in the 9th inning, I really don't know what they're going to do with the 9th inning. I don't think you can put Kenley Jansen out there. I know I hear on the Twitterverse and a lot of my Dodger friends that I talk to, Dodger fans, Brusdar is the name that comes up. But here's the thing that scares me about Brusdar. Yeah, Brusdar throws 100 miles per hour, but these are major league hitters. As you saw with that Tatis, if you can just get a little bit of the barrel on that pitch, Brusdar is putting all the power there. He's supplying all the power. So if you get a little bit of the barrel on there, you might hit a home run. So Brusdar scares me. So in the 9th inning, I think right now, Joe Kelly scares me. I mean, Blake Trinan scares me. I really don't know what to do with that 9th inning, to tell you the truth. Maybe Julio, but you might need Julio earlier if you don't get those 6 innings from Buehler. But I love what Julio did in that game against the Show Pods when he came in with the bases loaded and he got out of it. I think the thing is with Julio, he doesn't get scared, he doesn't get shaken. I know Vin used to say that it reminded him of Valenzuela in the way that Valenzuela wouldn't get shaken up. So I'm leaning right now towards Julio if you can get enough from Buehler to pitch that night there.
So I have a random hot take. I think the guy that they should go with in that situation is Victor Gonzalez. And the reason that I think that they should go with Victor, granted it'd be the same scenario with Brusdar, but the Braves haven't seen him.
Yeah.
And B, his delivery is a little, it's not as funky as Alex Wood's, but it's funky enough that he doesn't have to pitch from the stretch. And that's kind of what you need in a shall we say, a closing situation, right? I think they're going to use Julio as either a 3 or 4 as far as the starter goes, or a long relief option, so that way they don't have to go into the bullpen. Because I mean, the preposterous stat from Julio, from Elias, is he's allowed 1 hit over 5 innings in that Dodgers win the other night, and the last relief pitcher to toss 5+ innings while allowing 1 or fewer hits in the postseason was Pedro Martinez in Game 5 of the 1999 ALDS. That's insane.
So let me ask you this, though. I understand that you said it's a hot take. Do you think Roberts and Freeman have it in them to throw Victor Gonzalez there in the 9th inning?
I think Roberts does. The one that I don't is Friedman. As Dodger fans know, the Dodgers have the largest analytic staff or one of in all of baseball, right? So they rely heavily on those stats. Kind of going back to Game 3 in the AL or NLDS, they used Dustin May for 1 inning, and the reason they did the 1 inning thing is statistically, they've seen that that's kind of the amount of pitches that Dustin needs for a side session going into his regular go day, which would have been the following day if they would have played Game 4. So they rely heavily on some common sense things, but at the same time, to your point, they rely too much on situational statistics. That's kind of what gets them in binds with certain situations where, obviously, there's the 3 batter minimum now, right? Where that doesn't, I'm sure the Dodgers view that as a little disadvantageous, but with the depth that they have, they can make it work. So I'm curious to see, where they kind of have Victor in that depth chart, because he's got the stuff. There's no doubt that he has the stuff. He has the composure as you've seen kind of throughout. So I don't think they're worried about that. It's just more of a, where does he fit in this situation? How can he, is this a high leverage situation, low leverage situation? And that's my beef with sabermetrics. They focus too much on those outliers, if you will, that they don't necessarily need to, because if you go off a feel, then you don't pull a guy too soon or pull a guy too late. And that's kind of the other issue that's gotten the Dodgers into certain situations throughout the postseason over through this run of the division titles, is when they get in those moments, sometimes they leave a guy in too long. Kershaw, when he gave up the home run, in the NLCS a few years ago, that was one of those, like, yo, you left him out too long. At that point, it was about 75 pitches, and I think 78, 77 pitches, and that's when he gave up that bomb. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of how that caveat plays into it all. Joe Kelly, I think I'm pretty sure high on their list just because he's got, not only the big game experience, he's been there before, he's done it. So I think that's one of the reasons he's there. I agree with you on Blake Trinan. He has the stuff, but when he gets into certain situations, he tends to miss his spots or he gets too close to hitting a guy. And with a lineup like the Braves, you just can't risk getting a guy on base with a mistake of a hit by pitch. So, for me, if I'm the Dodgers kind of looking at this roster, the Jake McGee's, the Victor Gonzalez, the Dylan Floros make the most sense if they have to kind of, use a mixture of or closing by committee, if you will. But if you were to, if I were to kind of stick a pin on anyone right now, it'd be Victor Gonzalez. Like straight up, I think that's the guy that they should seriously consider in that situation. Because even though Bruce Starr, throws casual 100, the problem with his casual 100, like you said, is that he's missed that home run, not by a whole lot. Even with Cody's extraordinary catch, you didn't miss it by much. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of how they get there. The bridge for the most part is set up as far as, going from starter, relief, closing. And I think Julio is going to be that, that key element to the bridge to getting to the closing. But moving forward, as far as the ninth goes, like I agree with you, they can't put Jansen out there right now. Not right now. Unless they have like a blowout game where they're, kind of like how game 3 was, and they have a giant pad. There's no way psychologically that you can put him out there. But caveat to all of that, there's going to be fans there tonight. So I'm curious to see how that environment kind of maybe reinvigorates a guy like Kenley, because he's been on record saying that the lack of fans and the lack of adrenaline has affected him. But there's supposed to be 11,000 plus fans there tonight. So I'm kind of curious to see how that factor goes into going into those situations. How many are Dodger fans? Obviously, we don't know. But I would suspect that might be, one of those like, okay, let's see how this plays itself out and see what happens, if you will.
Well, but here's the thing. We've started the show. We've gone this far, right? And we immediately went to the ninth inning, right? We immediately identified as that's going to be an issue for the Dodgers. That being said, we're going over who would we put. Jansen never crossed our minds. He was never an option for us. So if he's not an option for us, what are you going to do with him in this series? Do you only use him in garbage time to try to rebuild his confidence? Because if you saw him in game 3, he looked lost. The way his body language was on that, he looked defeated. So if you've completely lost him, do you only use him in garbage time? Or do you use him in the 7th inning as a bridge to try to get to the 8th and the 9th innings? I mean, I think that's a big issue, is like, what are they going to do with Jansen in this series?
The unfortunate thing is they're having to figure this out in the postseason.
Yeah.
And it's, if this was, a regular 162 game season, let's say it's July, hey, let's give you the All-Star break. We'll sort it out. And then maybe when you come back, we'll use you in garbage time, just to get your reps in, to kind of get the feel back. And you're right. When he was out there, not only was he missing his spots, he just didn't feel comfortable on the mound. And obviously a huge thing that I've heard from guys is 90% psychological, 10% everything else, right? And if you're not in the right headspace to be out there, stuff like that's going to happen. So I'm super curious to see how they're going to use him, or if maybe they're just like, you know what, we're not going to take you off the roster. We're going to carry you. We'll keep you on for maybe some high leverage situations or whatever the case may be, and we'll use you. I could see them telling him something to that effect, so that way they don't really get into his head of, hey, I'm not the guy anymore. I'm not what I once was. I'm not a shell of what I was, right? What I'm curious to see, though, is how he reacts to being put into garbage time, though. It's one thing if you're going to try to put a guy in and get those garbage time reps, go out there and work on your stuff, right? It's another when a guy that's so used to being in the 9th, to getting ready for the 9th, being thrown in garbage time in the postseason. That's going to be a huge factor.
Let me put this scenario out there for you. Let's say the Dodgers do the unthinkable and Roberts throws him out there in the ninth with a lead tonight. And he blows it. And he blows the game. What does that do to the Dodgers for the rest of the series? Because I have a theory on this, and I want to hear yours. I think the makeup of this Dodger team is a little different than in previous playoffs.
And I agree with that. I think their makeup is definitely gonna, obviously they're gonna be there for Kenley, right? Because everyone knows what he's meant to the organization for 16 years. Let's not forget that. For 16 years, this dude's been a Dodger. I honestly think what they would do at that point is everyone understands what the end game is here. And it's, hey, we have to move on. We can't risk this, especially with a team like the Braves. Let's not forget the Braves themselves, their offense, they're no slouches either. Yeah. Is their pitching suspect as far as the rotation goes? You could say that, right? But they themselves as an offense and their bullpen are as evenly matched as the Dodgers have really seen all year. So it's one of those where it's, hey, we have to do the proactive chess move and get ahead of it so we don't get rid of our rook or our bishop. So I think at that point it has to be, we can't put him out there in these high leverage situations anymore. Especially a closing situation. Now, if it also depends on how bad that blow is. So let's say they're up by, we'll say 6 runs, and they put him out there in the ninth, and he gives up 7 runs. Like at that point, you can't put him out there again. Psychologically, you can't do that. The other thing with Kenley, he's super uncomfortable with guys on base. So, he's not accustomed to it. He's never been comfortable with it. And in the postseason, he tends to give up the long ball. So, that's the other thing with this lineup is all those things are very possible things that can happen because of how they manufacture their runs. So that's my theory on it, that they would move on and just say, hey, this is what we have to do for the sake of getting that elusive World Series.
I'm only bringing this up to you because, we've spent so much time talking about the ninth inning on this show. As a Dodger fan, I go into every playoff series with the trauma that I hope they win, but I expect them to lose. I finally understand now how Brooklyn Dodger fan felt losing every year to the Yankees. Okay, right. I get that now. I also, I know we're all different ages and all that stuff, but going back, my first vivid memory of the Dodgers is 1985, then NLCS in 1985. I was too young for them in 1981 when they won the World Series. But in 1985, when Tom Niedenfuer gave up that home run to Ozzie Smith, and then in the next game gave up the home run to Jack Clark, that sticks with me. So every time I watch a Dodger playoff game, I'm just waiting for that moment where the worst thing in the world is going to happen, right? And I just am getting that vibe right now that Jansen is my Tom Niedenfuer. The ghost of Tom Niedenfuer. I mean, whenever a Dodger, a reliever gives up a big home run, I tell my friends, we just got Niedenfuered. And I just don't want to I just want to win this year. I want to win this year. So I find it interesting that we're spending so much time right now talking about what the Dodgers are going to do in the ninth inning. To me, is that really is this a microcosm of what this whole series is going to be about? What the Dodgers are going to do in the ninth?
Well, I mean, here's the thing about the Braves. The Braves, when you're, in my opinion, when you're low-key good, that means you're good. You're legit. And the Braves were under the radar, low-key good all year. No one talked about them. No one, everyone's talking Astros, Dodgers, Yankees, Rays, but not a whole lot of mention about the Braves. And the Braves quietly did their thing. They've quietly gone out and won 5 in a row, similar to the Dodgers. Obviously, no sexy catches. There was the incident with Ronald Acuna where the Marlins threw at him. Aside from that, there wasn't a whole lot of, no pressure on the Braves. And that's one thing that the Braves carrying into the series, all the pressure in the world is on the Dodgers.
Yeah.
And thus far, they've managed it well because, obviously, 88 was the last time that they've won. And all the pressure for the most part is off of Kershaw now. He's going out and dealing. Having Mookie, that Mookie effect, as far as having him on there is carried the team up and down, right? But the Braves themselves, I mean, they have a roster. And that's to me where, we're going back to 85, where these guys can also go out and do the Ozzie and the Ozzie Smith thing and the Clark thing, because you have Ronald Acuna, you have Travis d'Arnaud, who's on a tear right now. You have Freddie Freeman, who is in most people's books the MVP for the NL. Dansby Swanson he's legit. He's not the best at his position for sure, but he's legit, right? And then you throw in again Marcell Ozuna, who I think is the Braves MVP through the postseason so far, because he's quietly going out and doing the thing. Their bullpen is legit. So I think it's one of those things where for sure the Dodgers, I think if they get put in that situation where they have to put Jansen out there and he gives up or blows a game, whatever the case may be, in my opinion, someone has to make that tough decision to, hey, we can't do this again. If we're going to use them, we're going to use them in middle relief, or if we get into a bind where we have to do a bullpen game even. But in my opinion, if he goes out and he costs them a game, you can't put him in that situation again, because he's obviously showing that he can't rebound from that adversity right now. And whatever he needs to work on, obviously he has to work on it. And I feel for the guy. Kenley has been that, the dominant closer for the better part of the last 5-ish years, right? And now he's, like you said, he's lost. He's kind of lost his way. But the unfortunate thing is, in this, pandemic season of 2020, there isn't really a lot of time to adjust on the fly. So I think it's going to be super interesting if that arises, how the Dodgers kind of move on from it and how they deal with it too. Obviously in the clubhouse, they'll deal with it, how they're going to deal with it. But when it comes to, hey, publicly, are we going to say anything or do anything? Dave Roberts has been pretty diplomatic when it comes to his responses when they ask him about Kenley. You and I both can agree when they asked him about that outing a few days ago. He said, I'll have to go back and watch it. There wasn't really anything that didn't look bad to me. And then after he watched it, he said, there were some great throws in there, doing the diplomatic bit, and which is all fine and dandy. But at the end of the day, it's the results on the field that obviously determine what goes on. So I'm super curious to see what they do.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Dodger fan needs to be prepared. These teams, I think, are very evenly matched. I think the Dodgers had the advantage when it comes to their starting pitching because they have so much of it. But yeah, the Braves bullpen is great. I mean, you mentioned Ozuna at the very end. I mean, is this the quietest 18 home runs in a 60-game span that you ever? I think this is the other interesting thing is because the schedule was so different this year. This is the first time we're seeing the Braves. So I think for a lot of us, seeing how good this team is, it's a little eye-opening because yes, the Show Pods had the second best record in the National League, but maybe the Braves were the better team than the Padres, especially since the Padres lost their pitching towards the end of the season.
I said this, obviously you weren't joining us yet, but I said this going into the celebration episode of the postgame show. I think the Padres were a year or two ahead of plan.
Yeah.
They're an arm, maybe 2 arms away from being legit. And a lot of people don't understand that, and I don't see how they don't. But obviously injuries got in the way, right? But to me, the Braves are as evenly matched as a team as the Dodgers have played all year. Because when the Padres and the Dodgers played the first go around, they didn't have Clevenger. Lamet was coming up, but they wasn't anywhere near what he was. And then they didn't have Austin Nola, and then they were just kind of getting it going, right? This Braves team, like you said, Marcell Ozuna, quiet 18 home runs. And the preposterous thing about that is when it comes to OPS, which is a stat that obviously, everyone looks at, Marcell quietly hit 1.067 in OPS. Quietly. So and again, you have Freddie Freeman on that team who's as quiet as they come. And he's going out there and doing the thing. He also hit 13 bombs. So, again, they were a quiet team. I don't know if it's, because Atlanta is a big media market, but I just think a lot of it is with the Dodgers going out and doing what they did and kind of walking through everybody. The Braves didn't really have anything sexy as far as the rotation goes. They didn't really have, a whole lot of noise that was made. But, the Dodgers and the Padres currently, that's the, like you said, the show pods, that's the ratings, But yeah. I'm curious as to how Walker Buehler is going to handle this lineup. Obviously Walker hasn't seen them this year, and vice versa. The Braves haven't seen the Dodgers. But with how they're playing right now, obviously this is not the Marlins or the Reds. the Braves are going to have their own questions to be answered on their end. But the Braves lineup with Walker going through, as Walker's kind of notorious for having that third go around where he runs into some issues. And with the blister, that could also play a little bit in the psyche, right? Before we came on here, you were talking that you hope that we can get maybe 6 innings out of Walker, and I hope the same because he went 95 pitches in his last outing. I just don't know if the Braves the Braves can get it going in an instant, right? Acuna has I forget how many leadoff home runs. I think it was like 6 or something like that this year. So it's one of those things where they have their own dynamic lineup. How do you feel Walker matches up against this lineup, the potential lineup that we're going to see tonight?
Look, I'm concerned because I think you need a healthy Walker Buehler in order to win the World Series. He obviously is a performer on the stage. I mean, what he did in the 2018 World Series, I mean, the Dodgers need him. And if he is not completely healthy, if that blister is hurting them, we're going to have to rely on our young guys, I think, to win this series. And the young guys I'm referring to are Dustin May, Julio Urias, and Gonsolin. Because, I love Kershaw, but Kershaw is Kershaw. You don't know what you're going to get from him. I hope this is the year that he dominates in the playoffs. I really do. But as a Dodger fan, I mean, I'm always concerned going into a series, but I'm definitely concerned where our top 2 pitchers, where Buehler's not 100% and Kershaw, and we're going to rely on 3 young studs. Now, I hope that everything we thought about these guys, the reason why we never traded these guys, May and Urias, is because these guys are going to come up big. So for me, I think it's important to win this game because it's going to take off the pressure on those young guys. If Buehler can get us, even let's say if he can get us 5 and we can get the bullpen to take us home the rest of the day, I'm feeling good about our chances in this series, even though I do think it's going to be a long series. But, I know that Buehler's talked to Rich Hill about how to deal with that blister. The third time around the lineup for Buehler has been a problem. So if he can just get through 2 times, I'm confident with our bullpen that we can get through it because I feel like we have the pitching to handle Freeman. We can throw McGee at him. We can throw Gonzalez at him. We have options. We can give him different looks. Even Alex Wood, even though that makes me a little nervous, but we have different left-handed options that we can throw at him where he's not seeing the same left-handed pitcher every time over a short series. So I'm nervous, but I'm hoping that Buehler can magically get healthy and just be that 2018 Buehler that we saw in the playoffs.
Well, and the funny thing about Walker Buehler is he's had at least 7 strikeouts, in each of his 8 career postseason outings. So, he's a gamer. He shows up when the time is needed and he goes out and does the thing, right? So I'm curious to see how that blister, plays into that, especially with this dynamic lineup of the Braves. On the flip side, the Braves pitching has been outstanding against the Marlins and the Reds, granted, but they've allowed just 5 runs through 5 games. And a crazy stat on that is that's tied for the second fewest by any team through 5 games in a single postseason. So, they're going out there, the rookie Ian Anderson has been going out there and doing the thing, someone the Dodgers have not seen. I tweeted it out earlier as far as Max Fried. I always want to say Max Fried. It's Max Fried. That he's 0-2 with the 6.55 ERA in 3 career starts against the Dodgers. So obviously it's going to be imperative that the Dodgers go after him, do what they've been doing, grinding out at bats, get him uncomfortable, get ahead in the counts as always, baseball 101. But I think, a huge driver into the Dodgers' success up to this point has been the Mookie Betts effect. And I'm curious to see how Mookie handles, the leadoff spot against these guys, going into it. And even when they get into their bullpen, because their bullpen's legit. When you see the the numbers that they throw up and the names in that bullpen, our old friend Grant Dayton's there, Mark Melanson, who's been the closer, who's essentially been lights out. Like it's crazy how he's kind of refound himself there in Atlanta. With 22 innings pitched, and he's only given up 8 runs with 7 technically being earned runs. So I mean that in itself, especially in a shortened season, is insane. But you have Shane Green, you have AJ Minter, who, by the way, AJ Minter's ERA all year 0.83. So they have their own murderer's row, if you will, as far as the bullpen goes. So I'm curious to kind of hear your take on how you think this Dodgers lineup will fare against this Braves lineup as far as the bullpen goes.
I think it's really important that the Dodgers get to the Braves starters. I would love to see the Braves starters go 2 or 3 innings, and the more they see that bullpen, I really trust this Dodger lineup. And you said it. It's the Mookie Betts effect. I mean, Mookie seems to be having the effect on this team that Kirk Gibson had in 1988 on that team. He established a tone from the beginning that it was this no-nonsense. Mookie's a winner. He's already won a World Series. So he walks into that dugout. I mean, come on. He turned Austin Barnes into an actual average major league hitter again. I never thought I was going to see that again. I thought Austin Barnes was done. You know, there was that first year, and I was like, oh, he's great. And then after that, it's like, what happened to Austin Barnes? So I think what Mookie is going to do is he's going to help. What I love about this Dodger lineup is they work the counts, they work those pitchers. And you mentioned this earlier, you know, I think it was Roger actually who mentioned it, you know, maybe after 1 or 2 times of seeing these guys, these Dodger hitters, they're going to figure them out. And I love what they did in that last series. They didn't rely on the home run to score runs. And the way that ballpark is playing, if these guys can keep hitting those gaps, they're just going to be running the bases all day. So I think the key is getting to those starters. Alonso, you tweeted out earlier, Max Fried, I had the stat, I think his ERA is over like 6 in 3 starts against the Dodgers. And I know it's a different team, but I felt a lot better after seeing what you tweeted there with Max Fried. So I think the key for the Dodgers is to get to these starters. And you had mentioned before, if the bullpen is pitching with a lead, I feel much better going into that night.
Well, and I think that's going to be the most important thing as far as, you know, getting ahead on those Braves is they need to get ahead quick, right? And as far as, you know, tonight goes, it's going to be interesting to see how they fare without seeing these guys, right? Obviously, the Dodgers have manufactured runs in the last 2 series, and I think that's going to be important going into this. And in my opinion, the dude that I think is going to kind of lead the horse there isn't going to be Mookie Betts, isn't going to be Corey Seager. I actually think it's going to be Cody Bellinger. And Cody is going to ride kind of the coattails of what he just did in that series going into this and ride that momentum, if you will. But he's seeing the ball great right now, and he's obviously running the bases like it's no one's business. But in my opinion, Cody, I think, is going to be kind of that key factor as far as you know, getting the Dodgers ahead, not only because of where he's going to be in the lineup, because I suspect, you know, he'll be kind of in the same spots where he's been. Like tonight, he's hitting 6 again. Yeah. So, you know, between him, Will Smith is hitting in 5, and AJ Pollock is in 7. So I mean, the Dodgers are obviously going to they're banking on these guys going out there with their patient at bats and doing the thing. And the lineups just dropped, so I'll read you those lineups real quick. Mookie Betts 1, Corey Seager 2, Justin Turner 3, Max Muncy 4, Will Smith 5, Cody Bellinger 6, AJ Pollock 7, Kike Hernandez 8, and Chris Taylor 9. The Braves are going to counter that with Ronald Acuna 1, Freddie Freeman 2, Marcell Ozuna 3, Travis d'Arnaud 4, Ozzie Albies 5, Dansby Swanson 6, Adam Duvall in the 7 hole, 8, Nick Markakis, and 9, Austin Riley. So pretty balanced lineups from both teams going into game 1, especially, you know, given the circumstances. I think this lineup for the Dodgers, I actually like AJ Pollock as the DH. I think it takes a little bit of stress off of him as far as not having to worry, you know, too much about the field component, because I think when he's been in that DH hole, you know, kind of over the last, you know, 60 games, he's fared well. And Kike, I'm not surprised that Kike is in second, but I am in the sense that it could have gone kind of either him or Chris Taylor, and then they could have put in Edwin, you know, kind of in that position. But it's going to be interesting to see how this lineup grinds out the at-bats against Max, because again, like the stat I said, his ERA against these Dodgers is 6.55. Granted, that's from, you know, last year, in the year before. But still, for the most part, this core Dodgers team was there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason why you're seeing Kike in the lineup is because Max Fried is a left-hander, right?
Yeah.
And I would love to see what do you have Rios's figures on, or his numbers on what he hits against left-handed pitching?
It's not great.
I know that Jock, I think we're just going to give up on the fact that Jock just is never going to hit left-handed pitching. I mean, I'm concerned about the fact that, Kike has not had a very good year, and now you're throwing him in here. But I think we're seeing him because, again, that righty-lefty matchup, which, again, just brings me back to that fear of, what are the Dodgers doing? Are we playing by feel? Or are we just going by that, by the book mentality that I feel gets us into trouble?
So he's got a pretty similar splits. He's hitting 230 against lefties, and he's hitting 250 overall. So it's not terrible. My only concern with Edwin is just you could tell, they brought him in as a pinch hitter this year, and he just wasn't feeling it as a pinch hitter. So that's my only concern with that. I honestly think that the guy that they would use in that situation for pinch hits is Jock. Because Jock is, everyone doesn't like what he does in the regular season, but in the postseason, he's had some memorable hits. So, I think Jock is built for that moment, going into the series. That's kind of what you need. You need some bangers as far as the pinch hitting goes. I am curious to see how Max Muncy also does in this series. Max was, he roped together a couple of hits, but, to your point about Jock having kind of a lackluster year, Max also hasn't had a great year. And that's a guy, obviously, that's never going to hit for average, but he's going to obviously hit bombs and manufacture runs, do the little things, if you will. But even that stuff he kind of struggled with this year. So and I'm also surprised that he's hitting 4. I actually would have thought that he would have been, a little lower in the lineup. But, it's like you said, are they doing the sabermetrics thing? Are they doing the matchups thing? Kind of what are they doing? If I look at this lineup, it looks like they're trying to see if they can get Max, in my opinion, probably 2 times through to make him uncomfortable, and kind of hopefully they can rope together some hits and some walks and get it going. So regardless, to your point earlier, when we started, I think this series, and my prediction was 6 games. I still think it's going to go 6 games. It wouldn't surprise me if it went 7. And the longer the series goes, though, I do think it benefits the Dodgers because of their depth. If you were to kind of put together a prediction, what do you think it would be for the series?
This series is feeling a lot to me like that 2018 NLCS between the Dodgers and the Brewers. I can't get over the fact, really studying the Braves, lineup and just how similar they are in terms of their offense and the bullpen. I think this is going to go 7. I hate to say that it's going to go 7 because it's just going to be 7 stress-filled games for me, and I wanted to avoid that. But I just feel, that can change. It will change if Buehler is healthy. I think Buehler is a game changer in this series. If Buehler can give us innings, I think in the end, I think you're right. I think the Dodgers will just outlast the Braves because of that depth that you were talking about. But right now, I have the Dodgers in 7. We're going back to the World Series. We're halfway to 1988.
And I can definitely see it going that way. I definitely think the Dodgers' depth at pitching, and obviously in their overall just roster, I think is what's going to be the key factor as far as how they move. My opinion, Cody Bellinger or Mookie Betts will be the MVP. Could also see them being co-MVPs because I'm expecting Cody to have a big series. But Mookie, I think, is just going to go out and just do what Mookie does every day when he just gets up out of bed and just does the thing. So it's going to be a fun series. It's good, like you said, it's probably going to be stress-filled because these Braves are legit. And on that, we'll go ahead and end our previous show. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel here on Dodgers Beat. It's just Dodgers Beat. Always, you can tweet myself or Juan. Our Twitter handles are down here somewhere. I don't know where. They're here. And most importantly, stay safe, enjoy the games, and we will catch you guys after them. In the meantime, talk to you later.